The following conversation is for educational purposes only and not intended to replace therapy or other mental health services. Viewer discretion is advised.
Are you trying to win? Or are you trying to heal? If someone is trying to win, that means someone else has to lose. And if you spend all your time trying to make other people lose, those people are going to be very unhappy. I don't know anyone that wants to lose all the time. So is the goal winning or is the goal healing?
Hey everybody, welcome back to Win the Night, where we are filming our multi-series episodes where we follow people's journeys from childhood all the way to where they are today. We're joined back here with veteran of the Air Force and trauma therapist Curley Lawson. Welcome back, sir.
Hey, welcome, Josh. I'm glad to be back.
And in last episode, by the way, is something that we did mention in the spirit of transparency and talking about we're human beings. We had skipped the last conversation, and this is it's allergy season, and so we had talked about that, and so it's I think it's important to keep that in mind, that our health comes first. And one of the topics we were talking about before we got on was taking care of ourselves first before having these conversations, because that's when we are most present, and so it's just something that I wanted to bring up before we get into this. But Curly, unless you want to add to it.
I do. I'm going to go like full disclosure and say last week I was just absolutely wrecked. I mean, runny eyes, coughing, sneezing, worst of allergies. And in typical GI fashion, we had something scheduled to do, and I was going to do it. I let you know, man, I look terrible, but I think I'm okay. And let's do this anyway. And you were certainly polite. And it's like, man, I think you should take care of yourself. And I was coughing, sneezing. No, I think I'll be fine. And then I thought, wait a minute. I'm not following the advice that I give people all the time. And I had this military mission-minded, mindset of I have to do this. So I thought better of it and agreed to reschedule.
And that's important too, like the military mentality, because to me, right, like I completely grasp and respect that mentality of. That's why when you mentioned it to me, I thought it important to say, hey, at the end of the day, you get to make that decision. If you want to do it, let's do it. If not, we can reschedule. But I respect that mentality, and I respect being able to say no. I'm gonna take a step back. I don't want to be distracted, even if it wasn't like the end of the world, like it wasn't like a life or death situation. It was allergies, right? But even then, if it's distracting, if it takes away from presence, which is the most important part of these conversations, then priority is presence. And so then if you're not able to be present, then the best solution is to take time away until you can be. And I respect that mentality is there, and that you were able to override that, because that's something I still struggle with at times, to override the mission critical aspect of your mind, of that mission first. And in this case, we're still living as though we're still a part of that.
Yeah, I got to tell you, the GI in me said, you got to do this. And then eventually the therapist in me said, no, you actually don't. Take care of yourself first. And fortunately, the therapist won that argument. But
right.
And the reason that I wanted to disclose this, particularly for any vets or anyone else on active duty, is I get that. I mean, that's a part of our experience, and sometimes it can come to the surface in ways where we're treating something like an allergy, attack, like, oh my God, I gotta, climb, be on a battlefield or something. And I didn't. I'm sitting in an office at home, and it was certainly okay for me to reschedule and engage next week in a manner that I think is going to be far more, hopefully, engaging than it would have been with me coughing and sneezing every 3 seconds like I was doing last week.
Right. And so certainly I think that it's paid off. And And just in the little discussion that we've had just before we started filming, I think that it definitely was the right decision.
Right.
And so for anybody that's watching that, sometimes you might want to, you got a lot of projects to do, maybe work demands it, but there are times in which you're if you can't be present, you might as well take the time, because either way you're not going to be connected, and if you can't be connected into the work that you're doing, well, then it's not going to be the output anyway that you're going to be satisfied with, and anybody else who you work for or work with is going to be satisfied with. So it's better to, and like we say in the military, bite the bullet and just do the difficult thing, and say, hey, you know what, I'm going to need to call off or reschedule in this case.
Right.
So I think in this case, self-care always wins.
Yeah. Well, good, man. It won last week. That's for sure.
Certainly, yeah. Last topic we were covering on the last episode was couples therapy, particularly versus individual therapy, and we spent the majority of that time talking about that topic, and kind of ended it with a branch into the next form of therapy, which is family therapy, something that I personally have had experience with one time. And that was when my older sister was in therapy. She was the first one of the family to, at least in the immediate family, to go to therapy. And so I think that I was still like a teenager, like 12, between the ages of 12 and 14, when all that stuff was happening. And so I distinctly remember me being like, well, okay, if you think we should go, because it was like the way that my sister brought it up was like, oh yeah, we should all be going to therapy, and so basically like, no, you need to go, like everybody needs to go. And so we were having like a reunion, but not everybody, and I think that's where it kind of got pretty derailed. Was that it was my brother, it was myself, my older brother after him, and then my sister, my older sister, but that's not all of us, and it was missing my parents. It was just basically a portion of the siblings, and so my older brother, who was older than the one closest to age to me, he outright refused and said, I don't want to go. And so then it was just my older brother and I and my sister that ended up going. And it was I remember feeling like a little bit intimidated, because here I was trying to tell my things, not having the ability yet to properly communicate my feelings, because at the time, looking back at it in hindsight, when we did that, I didn't have the language nor the I guess the ability to comfortably tell my story, because I come from a family that judges that very what's the word? They judge it very sternly, very I don't know what the right word for that is, but they're very judgmental of you saying anything that doesn't reflect well on other family members. And so that was something that I did not have the words yet at the time, and there was a lot of fear of being judged or being rejected, and so I remember feeling awkward about it, and then we only went once, and I don't know if it was my sister's therapist or a separate therapist. It was just the memory of it was just very, I don't know, it felt very like unstable of how it was happening. And so then that was my experience with family therapy. And after that, like we never went back. We never spoke of it again. And so it was just this thing of like this quiet thing that everybody didn't talk about after. And it just, no one brought it back up. It was such a weird, I would say that it delayed my time to go into individual therapy a lot longer because of that experience. And I know for a fact that it's probably not, that's not how that's supposed to work, but correct me.
Okay. Oh, all right. Well, first off, then, and so everything I'm giving is like very broad strokes about
Sure.
family therapy. So I don't want to, arm anyone to go, oh man, that guy on the internet said this or that about
Right.
about.
Of
So,
course.
and family therapy is complex, and there's complexity in family therapy that isn't necessarily present in individual or even couples therapy. So, imagine you own a cat.
Right.
So you take care of the cat. And couples therapy is you have two cats, and each cat has his own personality, and you figure that out. And sometimes, there's friction between two cats. Now imagine family therapy, now you have five cats. And, two of the cats are kittens, and one of the cats really, grumpy, but one of the cats might be ill, and maybe it's ill, maybe you don't know it's ill. So there are all these other factors that come into play with family therapy, and which is why some therapists even choose that couples and family therapy are licensed marriage family therapy. They focus on family predominantly because it is a very complex dynamic to work through. So, and just like couples therapy, you might need individuals to be in therapy on their own. And the family therapy, one of the reasons that I see family therapy uh, fail or people struggle with family therapy, first, well, is the whole family going to be present? Does the whole family want to even participate in the therapy? Does the therapist have an understanding of the family structure, including the cultural dynamics of the family? So if I'm working with a family that is Hispanic, there could very well be cultural dynamics there that might not be present with a family that's Asian, might not be present with a white family that's grown up in the Midwest. They might be present with an African American family that's grown up in the South. So it's not just family; it's everything that the family is bringing with them. It's understanding, well, what's the presenting problem that's bringing the family to therapy? Is it one person that everyone in the family is having a problem with? Is there a dynamic in a family that everyone has a problem with? And families have roles. And I'll ask someone, have you ever seen Star Wars? And most people in this country have seen Star Wars at one point or another. And it's like, well, every person, everyone in Star Wars has a role to play. Darth Vader's going to do a thing, Han Solo's going to do the thing. Everyone knows that role to play. Like, we don't expect Darth Vader to do hey, everybody, I made cookies. We don't expect that. We know, and family members, they have roles. So imagine what happens when all those roles get changed around. What if all of a sudden Darth Vader is, behaving like Chewbacca? Well, that doesn't make any sense. That throws everything out of whack. And so family therapy has so many components in it. And this is one of the challenges of it. And for therapists that may not have the training, it can be a thing that's overwhelming. For families that don't know what to expect, it can be a thing that really lets them down. Should family therapy be a one and done? Maybe sometimes the whole family's coming in and they're just getting a sense of, oh, this family has a very, complex problem and it's gone back years and these are the reasons why. And the family goes, oh, thanks for shedding some light on that. Sometimes a family is in therapy because there's one person, they usually identify themselves or they're identified by the family as sort of like the black sheep. And I've had a lot of conversations with people that have been identified as the black sheep. I'm the black sheep of my family. And I'm sure someone listening to this might either feel that they're the black sheep or they know the black sheep or they've heard that expression. And then I even begin to explore, well, what's that mean? That you're the black sheep. Let's even talk about like what that means, because the black sheep just means different from the outside. I mean, not necessarily on the inside. If you've ever actually been around sheep don't care if there's a black sheep. The wool from the black sheep is just as warm as the wool from the white sheep. If you're eating mutton, like no one's ever ate a piece of mutton and go like, this came from a black sheep. I mean, so even when we talk about those differences, well, how important are those differences? And sometimes those differences are about one person bearing the weight of the family, or they are deemed responsible for the ills or the woes of the family. And that's unfair. It's very often, a child. So unraveling all of that can be very complex. Uh, when people don't have faith in therapy, or they don't even understand what's going to happen. So someone says the whole family should go to therapy. Okay, why?
Mhm.
Why should though? So if we haven't even explained why the family's in therapy, if we don't explain what the expected outcomes are going to be, if the therapist doesn't explain why family therapy is different than couples therapy and individual therapy, uh, I can understand the frustrations with those outcomes, particularly when there are children involved, because at various times it might be, a therapist or, several therapists working with the family. If you have small children involved, do they understand what's going on? So they might need a different type of therapy, like play therapy or something like that, that they can, express what's going on for them. Parents typically don't want to hear that they're not parenting their children correctly. So they can be, quite, hostile to the idea of someone saying, well, this is what's going on, or how you're raising your children isn't meeting their needs, or there's a degree of neglect or even abuse. So I can understand all of those components going in. Like, there may be a great reason for a family to go to therapy, but I can understand that every person coming in might have a degree of confusion or anger or sadness or frustration. And even expressing that can be problematic. And then even assessing the needs of the family are different than assessing individual needs. What does the family need? And it's like with couples therapy, well, now the family dynamic is actually the client, not an individual member of the family, but the family dynamic. Just like in couples therapy, well, the relationship is the client, not the individual. The therapist is really about, well, how do I help the relationship? So with family therapy, well, how does the therapist help the family? And is everyone going to be on board with what helps the family?
That's it makes me ask like a million questions in my mind, and so I'll do my best to sort through the ones that I think are most important.
Let's go with 8. Let's go for eight.
So what I would wonder is, so then let's say for example somebody doesn't like, I would imagine that a lot of the cases, if not most of them, are people that haven't gone to therapy yet, individual therapy, that are having problems within the family, and somebody in the family goes, we're doing this over and over again, and so we need to figure something else out, and so we need to go to therapy. And then they decide, right, and right then and there, and maybe there's a discussion after people go back and forth. No, I don't want to do that, and then they go, more people start going towards the, yeah, let's do it. Um, is that something that, is that still doable? Like, is that still manageable if all of these individuals haven't gone to individual therapy to go to family therapy?
It can be, and there are challenges in that too.
Mhm.
So the assessment process is crucial, because what the family is saying is happening may not actually be what's happening. So it's important that the therapist be able to assess as much as possible. And if you have members that aren't present, or, even hostility, that's why, I like to talk about, well, what's the perspective of the family members about therapy? What do they think is going to happen? What would they like to happen? What would they like to see happen? If there's hostility, and giving that voice instead of everyone, because one person might go, oh my gosh, I can finally be heard if I go to therapy. Another person might be thinking, well, they're going to say the problem is me. The other person might think, oh, this is just a complete waste of time and be totally checked out. So if we can at least get everyone on the same page of, well, do you even want to be here? Is there a problem? What does everyone think the problem is? So that, getting an idea of what the individuals in the family believe the problem is that's brought them to therapy, and then doing an assessment of the family, which may confirm that, it may even disconfirm that, depending on everyone else's perspective or what they see. Like the 8-year-old's perspective or what the problem is in a family is probably going to differ from the parents' perspective of what the problem is in therapy. So getting everyone's perspective about that, then doing an assessment and coming up with something that is then diagnostic and then we can develop like a treatment plan for the family is really important. But that, and the more people that are involved, that's complicated. And if all family members aren't present, that's even more complication, because what if the person that's present has this crucial perspective that the therapist doesn't get, or doesn't go into the assessment at all?
Right. And so then, I would imagine, me just looking at it from the outside, is this the most difficult form of therapy?
It is for many therapists. It's the most difficult form of therapy. I'll say that. And I would say that if there is difficulty, it is because getting everyone on board is a challenge. Do you want to be there? Are you going to participate? With individual therapy, typically the person wants to be there. Couples therapy, they, for whatever reasons, they typically agree to be there. Group therapy, those members, usually want to be there. Family therapy, that is some resistance, some reluctance. Some people want to be there, some people don't want to be there. So there is a dynamic in family therapy that the other types of therapy don't have. Usually in the other types of therapy, there's more willingness to be there. In family therapy, everyone might not be willing to be there, and everyone might not even be present. So if a couple has 3 kids and they're going to be in family therapy, and and 2 of the kids are adults, so the parents and the 2 adult kids show up, but the teenager says, I'm not going, and doesn't show up. Well, they'll do what they can with what they have.
Right.
But that crucial point might be the teenager that's not there.
And so when they're younger, like for example, I was preteen, early teens when I experienced it, and to be completely honest, I don't know that I was is there a certain age group in which family therapy is more recommended for, or is this something that somebody, a family can benefit at all ages? Like that's something that I wonder a lot about, because I wonder how much more present I could have been. Let's say we had all done this many years later, when I was already gone through my own personal therapy and had a better understanding of what was going on. Where I think as a younger kid, like I didn't have the full picture, because I still relied on the picture that had been painted for me at the time, which was that of the family dynamic of like with my mom's side, because that's who I grew up with. So I still had a picture, a smaller picture of what was actually going on. And so does that complicate things more when they're younger? Is there something that what is your take on that?
Um, well, yes. Again, so my take on it is, my take on it is yes, and it is complicated. And so one of the a phrase that is used in therapy is, well, it depends. It does. It depends on, like, there's so many factors involved. There is, the age of the children is one thing, but how well those children are functioning. There's some 6-year-olds that are functioning better than 9-year-olds. So even saying a specific age isn't necessarily, that benchmark. Oh, the kid is this age, so we need to do that. So it is about how well that child understands, like, themselves, their place in the family, how securely attached they are, there's so many elements that are involved that it does make family therapy complicated. Now, don't get me wrong, family therapy can be successful, and I've had successful family therapy with families that were motivated to have successful therapy. But that did mean like me spending, sometimes it's spending a little bit of time individually with one-on-one, getting a sense of what that person is saying and making sure that they feel heard and that they are heard, as well as being able to say, well, is there anything going on that you don't want to say in front of the family? So in the case that I was talking about, if you're, and all of this is, just theoretical, this is about a real family. If the 16-year-old is using drugs and oh my God, and the whole family is upset, this kid is using drugs and it's really complicating our lives. And if I talk to the teenager, 16-year-old individually, and they go like, well, it seems like there's some, substance use going on. And they own that and go, yeah, there is substance use going on. But the reason there's substance use is going on is this other factor in the family. And they're effectively self-medicating. Okay, well, they're self-medicating, with substances, that's a problem. But if we can get to resolve this other unspoken thing, then there's no need to self-medicate anymore. So while everyone is going like, oh yeah, they're, using drugs, if the 16-year-old heard the parents talking about, oh yeah, they're in, they have significant financial stress. They might have to sell the house. That means they're going to have to move. This kid's going to lose all their friends. Their whole world's going to get turned upside down. Their plan for the future is no longer viable for them, and they don't know how to express that or deal with that. Then now they're self-medicating with drugs. So the parents think the drugs are the problem. The teenager thinks, oh, my whole life is about to be, upended in a way that they don't have a say in. So, and they don't know how to tell the parents that, or they don't feel free to tell the parents that. So they're pushing all of that down. So
Right.
sometimes, sometimes the problem isn't the problem. What everyone believes isn't the problem. So you had a whole family where, 4 adults show up and they're saying, hey, this teenager is the problem. But the teenager believes, well, my life is about to significantly change. Well, that's the problem. So from the therapist's perspective, it's like, oh, well, the family relationship is very stressed because this teenager is engaged in behavior that the rest of the family doesn't approve of. And the teenager is, using, substances because they don't know how to talk to their family, or they don't have the permission to talk to their family,
Right.
because, very often, in some cultures, kids don't get to address their parents. I mean, in some cultures, it's like, you're a child, shut up, do child things. I'm an adult, I'm going to do adult things. So even teaching them or helping them learn a new communication style that everyone can kind of come forward and not wait until their 18th birthday or whatever to be able to talk to the other adults. So that might be, in that case, like the problem for the family it's not necessarily drugs. It's not even the fact that they're in financial stressors. It's that, there might be a dynamic that allows them from having that communication that they need to actually communicate. But if the teenager isn't present, if the therapist never gets that information from the teenager, all they're getting from the parents and the siblings is they're using drugs, make them stop using drugs.
And that's another thing, another factor in it all that makes it, I think, that much more complicated is just that if somebody's not present to paint you a better picture, um, in some senses, a therapist becomes, what's the word? It's like it's you're addressing an inaccurate picture, like a not complete picture. And so then if you don't have the full picture, you just can't address something that you don't know. And that's where it can become complicated. I'm sure with enough time and training and experience, you'd be able to figure that out. But then in that scenario, just thinking about what it would take to get my family involved in therapy, I just can't even fathom that idea of like everybody, because there's so many of us
Yeah.
to be involved in therapy. Just I could imagine just thinking about it is a nightmare to me, and I'm not the one, dealing with it.
So it can be a lot like putting together a jigsaw puzzle. So right, you have like X amount of pieces, and the more pieces you have, the greater clarity you have about the greater clarity that you'll have about what that final picture is going to be. The other thing is the assessment process. So if I'm doing a family assessment, but I don't have all the members there, well, how accurate can that assessment be? If the assessment is what leads us to, some type of diagnosis, if I don't have a good assessment, how can I have a good diagnosis? If I don't have a good diagnosis, how can I develop good treatment? So that so and being able to explain that to, family members, really everyone. I mean, I talk to, we do assessments to understand like what's going on, and then we take that diagnosis, and that's how we build treatment. But if we can't do a good assessment, well, how good can a diagnosis be, and how good effectively can the treatment be? And explaining that so people go, oh, I get it. And it's sort of like, if you go to an ER and, I got pain, and they go, where's the pain? Yeah, somewhere. Yeah, I got some pain. Okay. All right. They're going to do the best they can. But if you say I have pain at this point on my elbow, and it started at this point, and I feel, and then, okay, let's x-ray or whatever. Yep. Broke. I mean, so the more information they have, the better that assessment can be, the better that diagnosis can be, the better that treatment's going to be. And if we're missing crucial information for that initial assessment, then everything else is like, well, we don't have a solid assessment. How solid can the diagnosis be? How solid can the treatment be? And just like if you went to an ER and said, well, I got pain, and you couldn't give them anything other than I have pain, well, they might give you a pain reliever. That might help a little bit. So there are some things that they could do that could be helpful, but nothing as helpful as being able to do, a really great assessment, really great diagnosis, and then come up with a really great treatment.
And what it comes down to is the willingness, I think, of those individual family members to commit, because different family members could have a different ability to commit to things, right? Like if, for example, you mentioned like the black sheep earlier, and I was thinking for a while, like I feel like the black sheep in my family, but I think in some degrees we all were like as the kids, because I certainly wasn't the first of my siblings to go to therapy. Maybe I was the first in speaking about it this loudly, but certainly not the first to go and say, hey, something's not right here. This something needs to be addressed. And so then when you have that, and then I have siblings that don't care to even touch that. And then my parents obviously is another factor. It just makes it just where it's like how many families actually do go as a unit, because I can't fathom that. Maybe that's just my bias, like my biased opinion of that's been my experience, that my entire family, the level of commitment this requires, I don't think my family as a unit is capable of that level of commitment. And it must be I don't know, maybe just based on your experience, how likely is an entire family to go to therapy?
Well, again, it depends. So, all right, how big is a family? What's the age spread in the family? What's the family grown up believing about therapy? Has anyone, have they seen success with other people going to therapy? Which is a factor that can get people to go to therapy. If someone is like struggling and all of a sudden they're much better, and family and friends go, wow, you seem like you were struggling and you're much better. And then they're like, oh yeah, started going to therapy. It doesn't mean that everyone's going to immediately go to therapy, but they're more likely to go to therapy. So when we can talk about, successful outcomes, encourage people to do things that gave a family or friend or someone else successful outcomes. Unsuccessful outcomes discourage people. So, yeah, I could have 10 successful outcomes and that's amazing and wonderful. But if I have one successful outcome, it's like that person or that family is like, oh my God, it's the worst thing ever. And it gets blown up. And so I know therapists, I know therapists that only do family therapy. And I'm just like, wow. And they love it, but that's their lane of the pool. And I don't know any therapist that has 100% success. I mean, because that success really is dependent on other people doing like their work, but we can encourage families to go. And families like in some families, again, depending on, the size of the family and where they're located, any cultural biases, like there are cultural biases against family therapy. So depending on, you know, what those factors are, we can have successful family therapy. And again, it depends so much on the family. It depends sometimes on what they believe about therapy. If they've had successful experiences, if they know others that have had successful experiences, therapy, therapy gets a bad rap. I mean, someone has a bad experience and it's like, oh man, the therapist did this or the therapist did that, and it's the worst thing in the world. And it may not even be remotely accurate. Like all of that is through the lens of someone else. Right. And that's something that I remind my intern students all the time. Our clients have every right to feel however they feel about this therapeutic experience. We can do everything they're quoting right according to treatment plans and protocol and everything. We can do everything according to that, and someone can have an experience that is upsetting to them, that's viewed through the lens of their life and their experiences that we may know nothing about. And I've had experiences like that too with clients where I was like, internally, I'm like, man, I am crushing it today as a therapist. And someone goes, well, this is my last session with you ever because of some internal thing that I knew nothing about.
Right.
Which is absolutely their right. And I get that. I mean, people drop out of therapy, families drop out of family therapy, and there is challenging getting everyone into therapy. Males, especially, there are some males, cultural bias against therapists. Man, for me to be an African American therapist from Chicago, wow, like that's huge. Like I threaded a lot of needles to get to that point because there is significant bias against therapy. I mean, I think at this point, my family of origin, those of us, like, we could go to therapy now, but we certainly wouldn't have like when I was a kid. That just was not the thing.
Man, there's so many factors that anybody that does that, and especially that's the only thing they do, man, they gotta have a mind of steel, you know?
Yeah, passion. I mean, even within the realm of therapy, and it's sort of like, medicine, man. There are people that specialize in different aspects of medicine. There are people that specialize in different aspects of therapy. And I know therapists that are great therapists that will not do couples or family therapy. They're just like, that's not a good fit for them. So they recognize that. And they're great individuals and they're great with groups. I know family therapists that are like, man, I cannot do group therapy. I'm like, what? So,
What? Yeah.
but better to be, better to realize that, better to, for the therapist to recognize like their fit. So that helps the outcome. What's not great, what I would not want for a family is a therapist that is uncomfortable with family therapy, doesn't want to do family therapy, and has had, little to no training with family therapy. And I think it's very important for families to ask about those things, like what's their training in family therapy, what modalities, and most people don't know to ask those questions. So, if you're listening to this, if you're going to any type of therapy, ask your therapist what's their training, what's their intervention, what's their expected outcome. Like, have that conversation with them. It's not going to, it will not hurt the therapist feelings. And if it hurts the therapist feelings, that is definitely not the therapist for you. Like, anyone that is like offended that someone is asking about the work that they do, that is not the person that I want to work with. If I
Right.
and as a therapist that sees a therapist sometimes, and that can be a bit of a chess match, it is asking, okay, well, what's your training in this? Or, and sometimes it's the same type of training that I've had. And being on the other side of that is an interesting experience for me. But any therapist that answers, well, I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing or where I'm walking out of that office. No, I'm I may run out of that office. And that's fine, man.
Oh man, that's something that to me, just the idea of it, like I mentioned to you, is like I can't even imagine my entire family, because it's so complicated. There's so many aspects. My First of all, it requires two marriages. It involves two marriages. It involves their kids, a kid in the different one, and like they're my sibling, but then not part of this family segment, not part of this family's story, and then but a part of mine, but not the other ones, not some of the others. It's such a complicated thing. Like, just to think about it, it was so tied up in a knot that man, just some of those. I think there are some families that I don't know. I think are, in my opinion, like mine, is better off going the route of individual therapy to address that.
Well, one of the tools that family therapists will use is a genogram, which really kind of like maps out the family. So sometimes the thing that you just said, when we can put that in black and white or multicolored for some more complicated genograms, just to like really conceptualize all of those connections. So, because sometimes, like, especially when we grow up in a family, we don't always see the complexity of those connections and how different our family is from other families.
Right.
And every family has, like, some degree of complexity. So when we, go back several generations and can show, blended marriages and who's where and what, and, various offspring and all that complicated thing, when that's in black and white, sometimes people can go, oh, yeah, this is more challenging. Because if we have, cultures that just go, like family is family, everybody's your family, like family is family, and there's truth in that, but also family is complication. Family is, and I try to use, some metaphors that will make some sense for people. Like, family is a complicated recipe. So when we eat the meal, we're not typically considering each individual ingredient. We're just looking at the end result, like family. If you make lasagna, you're not thinking of, most people are eating a lasagna. They're going, well, 4 types of cheese, 2 types of meat, noodles, the sauce, what types of tomatoes that you make the sauce from yourself, or did you like canned sauce or whatever? Like, that's family. All of those different aspects coming together. So a genogram can help us see that bigger picture, kind of the recipe of the family. And sometimes just looking at that is enough for us to go, yeah, this is maybe more complicated than I thought it was, or why is it unreasonable if a family, like a couple that has, in the example I was giving, has 2 adult kids, and then later on they have another child, maybe intentionally or not, and there's even generational divide between the siblings. So like they're siblings,
Yep.
but they're like, wow, I've worked with families where like the youngest sibling was young enough to be the child of the oldest sibling.
Right.
They're siblings, but they've had completely different lives, and they've had completely different families within the same family.
different versions of those parents too.
Yeah. So helping everyone get on board and see that is really important. So that can be an aspect of family therapy that a lot of families don't see is the complexity of their family.
Right.
And and then the roles within the family, because every, family members have roles and they can have the same rigidity as a movie script or a play script. If everyone knows, well, so and so is going to do that because they always do that, that person has a role to play. I was working with the therapist once and he just said, stop being peacemaker. It's like, oh my God, this is happening, this is a fight, and this is thing, and then I
Yeah.
gotta try to resolve it and he just said, stop. And I was like, what? Stop. It was like, stop. Like, you're in this role. Stop being in this role. And then there's like, okay. So the next time the big blow up thing happens and I didn't do anything, and there was a point, literally everyone kind of stopped and looked at me and like, oh, aren't you gonna do anything? Because like it was like, hey, it like they queued me up for my line, and I was like, no, not doing that. So recognizing that is crucial because once we understand that we're in the role, we can change the role. We can
Right.
begin, and if one person changes their role, that does change the dynamic of the entire family. And some people are resistant to that. Like
Yeah.
resistant to that.
Oh yeah, and that's something that I've personally experienced just from individual therapy. Um, I there was almost like I got this sense from my younger sister when I decided that I am no longer going to be I'm not going to play this game anymore of everybody everybody makes sure that like in this case my mom is okay. So no matter what happens, who starts it, it doesn't matter. We check up on her. And so I got that question from my younger sibling, right? She was like, aren't you going to in this case it was my mom's birthday. Aren't you going to go say happy birthday? I was like, as far as I knew, she was upset with me. So if she's upset with me, she's my mom, she's my parent. She needs to come and tell me. Because if I go over there, if I go and I have this conversation and I go, hey, are you okay? All that's going to do is feed the dynamic of that you can do anything in the world and you don't have to come search for your kids. It doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah.
And that dynamic is what has caused this really difficult dynamic between siblings where we don't get along. We argue, there's favoritism, there's resentment against each other because that everyone's fighting for I put it this way, and my sister was like exactly that, and so I'm going to use this reference. It's like we're all looking for love under the microscope, and so if somebody was receiving one more drop of water in the middle of the desert in a drought, that one drop that you get that they didn't will be used against you, and it will be favoritism. And so even though I still need a bunch of water, right?
Yeah.
For them, you received a whole life worth of water versus what I got. And so that dynamic, right? And just simply making that change of like, I'm not playing this game anymore, it has shifted the dynamic. Is like everybody kind of like was looking around like, what happens now? And so just doing that, right? Just deciding like, I'm not going to play this game anymore, or I'm not going to be in this role. As you mentioned, right? Like changes the dynamic. I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah, it's very similar to actors in a play. If someone forgets their line, then other people are trying to prompt them because they can't. The play can't go on now because if you didn't say the thing, and if someone goes, nope, I'm not saying a thing or doing the thing, or even how we reconceptualize like what's going on in a family. So one of the things that's very common with kids is, they want to know that they're loved, and it's very common for kids to go to a parent and go like, do you love me as much as you love them? Or who do you love the most? Or something like that. And because kids see differences in parental response to children. And one of the things that I work with parents and to first off, this is the standard answer that parents give. I love you all the same or I love you equally. And no kid anywhere believes that.
Right.
Like, no, if they believe the truth, they'll be asking. Like, they would. Like, it's like it. So, what I encourage parents to say is, I love you uniquely. How I love you is not how I love your siblings. And then, because that allows for greater exploration of how love is shown and how in different needs. Like, sometimes to go like, well, Billy might need more of my attention than, Susie does right now. But Susie might need that later on. And it's not that I don't love you or I don't love him. It just means that sometimes you all need me in different ways. And some kids need more. And it doesn't mean that parents don't love like their other kids, but explaining like why they're getting that extra drop of water. And it's not that the other kid doesn't matter. It's like they are struggling in a way with something that you're not. And how I love you is not how I love them. I'll never love anyone the way that I love you. And also never love anyone the way that I love them. And asking the kids, well, how do you feel? Do you feel like you're getting less? If they are, acknowledge that, like their feelings about that are real. Asking the kids, well, what would you like to see? What could make this better? With the caveat, it doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to happen, but getting the kids an understanding of what they see in the family dynamic, how they feel they are being placed in the family dynamic, and why that can be so helpful for them, as opposed to I love you all the same or I love you equally, because if they felt that, they wouldn't be asking questions about who do you love the most.
Right.
They would know, they would feel, oh, we're loved all the same. And to even ask, things like in their friend group, like, well, which of your friends do you like the most? For parents, or which of us do you love the most? Sometimes help them understand, oh, we feel, do you love, asking them, well, do you love mommy exactly the same way you love daddy?
Right.
You love mommy as much as you love daddy. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So helping them understand that, oh yeah, we're all going to have this sort of ebb and flow of emotion and demonstration, and that's okay, as long as it's equitable in the long run, as long as it's going to be balancing out about the same, and no kid is feeling like they're being they're getting less, and that they are getting less. For parents to kind of like internal gut check, are they getting less, and if so, how can that be balanced?
And so then that brings up the topic of I think, and I guess I won't really know until I have my experience with children. I think that also that requires from the parents an ability to be able to know how their child receives love, gives and receives love, because without that, if you don't know how to demonstrate love in the way that child receives it, then from your perspective, you could be giving all the love in the world, and it's like every day I do this thing that for me feels like love, but then for that child it's not, and so then that child could then go a lifetime of feeling unloved, because what they were receiving from the parent for them didn't feel like love. And I think that the knowledge of of knowing your child well enough to figure out their love language, I think that part is the difference, in my opinion. Again, something I won't be able to speak to with fact from my experience until I've had it, but just from being the child in that perspective, um, I had a specific way that I receive love, and I did not feel that, and so then that I think was just a lack of a learning to figure out what that might be for each individual child.
Yeah, man, that's so learning your child's love language as you're learning and understanding your child, like, as they're understanding your love language, what they like and don't like, how they feel, don't feel. So much challenge in that. The other thing that really comes that comes to mind, when we're discussing, like parents and kids, particularly, is helping parents be open to the idea of growth as a parent, because sometimes parents in family therapy, they can express to a therapist, "Oh, you're saying I'm a bad parent." I mean, so the moment that concept of bad parent is brought out, people get defensive. They and I understand. So, and especially if it seems like there are elements of neglect or abuse involved. I mean, parents can become very defensive at that point, because there are actually actions, that sometimes as mandated reporters that we have to take. So one of the things that I like to explore with parents is, well, could you be a better parent? Because I don't know anyone that couldn't be a better parent. I'm not stating that you're a bad parent. I'm not saying that. But what I like to explore is, could you be a better parent? And if so, what would that look like for you being a better parent? And also for your kids, what would you being a better parent look like for your kids? Because now I'm not talking about a bad parent. I'm just talking about someone becoming a better parent and what that would take. And are they willing to do that work to be a better parent, as they understand being a better parent, and as they understand their kids' perspective of being a better parent. And again, with the caveat of, kids don't get to make all the decisions. Like a kid's idea of a better parent might be pizza and ice cream every night. Well, that is not being a better parent.
Right.
Well, we have to, put some reasonable guidelines around all of that. Can you be a better parent with the resources that you have? Can you be a better parent with the, with the time frames that you have? And, is there sacrifice in being a better parent? Are there any cultural, prohibitations from them being a better parent, to even be able to explore that, because parenting, in 2026 is not exactly the same as parenting in, 1986 or, 1946 for that matter. So as we go further back in time, what parents do has changed quite a bit. But, so starting in that place of non-judgment and without saying, things are going to be punitive, can really help, people, move. I'll ask kids, could you be a better kid to your parent? And they're like, oh, because kids like the idea of hearing, hey, could you be a better parent? Yeah, be a better parent, right? Could you be a better kid? Oh, so, when the family, having that discussion with the family, well, what does better even look like? What does healthier even look like? And hearing from everyone, because, when the parents hear from the kids what being a better parent is, sometimes that's very insightful for them. Wow. Yeah, maybe I do that. When the kids are hearing, from the parents what being a better kid is, that can be very insightful for them. And it gives them, helps develop a treatment plan for them that they devise, as opposed to something that the therapist devises for them. Like the therapist will probably have some input, but the more it's about what they want and what they're willing to do, the greater the success can be. Because now we're like, well, if you can envision being a better parent, do you have it? Do you have what you need to do that? And are you willing to do that? Does being a better parent for someone, does that mean getting up 30 minutes early and making breakfast and sitting down and having breakfast with the kids before they go to school? The kids say, man, we really like to have breakfast with you. And does the parent say, well, I could do that. I could get up and make breakfast as opposed to a bowl of cereal. So, okay, well, that's a doable thing, for the kids. Does being a better kid, could that mean less video time in the evening and actually sit down and everyone talk about how they're doing? Okay, yeah, I could do that. So breakfast together in the morning and time together in the evening to discuss how they're doing. That's those are little things that can have a tremendous impact on the dynamics of a family.
Oh man, and we could go on and on about the complexity of all of that. But as our time comes to a close here, I think some important takeaways. I think that is that there is no one size fits all, and so I think that the um, with the knowledge, right, that all of these forms of therapy exist, um, that 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 are now available for people to approach and to attempt, I think is uh, something that when I was younger, even as a kid, it's not hasn't been all that long really that it's been this open, this not taboo, at least from a cultural perspective for my family. It's still to some degree taboo and something that is kind of kept in quiet. But I've noticed that at least in my becoming an adult, um, it's been a lot more open and a lot. I mean, hey, we have a podcast right now, and we're having an open conversation, and so therefore it has to be more open than it was before because there just weren't these kinds of podcasts even 15 years ago, talking about stuff like this. So I think that the best thing we can do in these situations is to just bring these methods out to light for people to make a decision on what they think is best for them. And if it's something that is doable for a partner, a family member, or themselves, that it is there and worth attempting, because there's just so many factors, and you don't know what you don't know. So I think that is an important conversation, and so I appreciate you having spent this past hour talking about this topic.
Yeah, dude. I mean, first off, that hour flew by. That was very like that was very fast.
Yeah.
The other thing, just like how I conceptualize things is, there's some standards for me that I will go back to over and over, and this is something that comes up and for me as a therapist, and I'll discuss it. Are you trying to win? Or are you trying to heal? So in families, are you trying to win in the family, be the winner, or is the goal healing the family? If someone is trying to win, that means someone else has to lose. And if you spend all your time trying to make other people lose, those people are going to be very unhappy. They may leave, they may do whatever. I don't know anyone that wants to lose all the time. And why would you want that for your family members, to lose all the time? So is the goal winning or is the goal healing?
That's an important question, and I think we'll end it with that. If you guys want to see the next topic and next conversation, stick around. Thank you again, Curly, for joining us for this one.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, we'll end it right here, and let me just stop recording here. 1 second. Recording and stop.